This video will review and compare two Vortex spotting scopes, the VIPER HD 65mm and the Razor HD 65mm. The scopes are similar as mid-range and mid-price scopes, with the VIPER retailing for $850 and the Razor retailing for $600. First, let's talk about form. Style cues favor the slightly shorter and lighter Razor, with a more sleek dual-toned appearance and of course the thin red line boasting higher HD optics. VIPER contends a basic but solid appearance. Both have center balanced tripod mounts and will balance on a flat surface, but the Razor is fit with a back leg support and the front just barely rests, making it less of a balance act when table scoping. Both have adjustable tripod ring mounts, with the Razor's fastening knob set slightly lower than the VIPER's. Sun guards are both smooth, and both have fitted rubber objective lens covers with a hole for string attachments. Interestingly, the Razor cap mounts into the inner ring and can only be on when the hood is retracted. The detachable eyepiece is larger and centered on the Razor, and it mounts via a bayonet attachment, whereas the VIPER has a threaded ring that screws in and also has a Picatinny rail. Coarse and fine focus knobs are similar in smoothness, but the Razor has less resistance. So now let's talk about protection. The VIPER comes with a neoprene stretch cover that is nearly impossible to get on, and it seems to get in the way of the function as well. The Razor comes with a soft carry case that can actually remain on the scope while it is tripod mounted and in use. The front and the back zip out, and there are Velcro areas to secure the flaps so that you can use it without actually taking out of the carrying case. Actually pretty handy. Bottom line, the Razor gives a more premium feel and a better optical image, but it's actually surprisingly difficult to show that on a video review. So what I'm going to do is share my user experience and then some digiscoping shots that I was able to take. But first, let me comment on some of the specs. Overall, they're pretty similar scopes, both being 65mm objectives with mid-range zooms, about 15 to 45 power. Interestingly, the Razor is actually 5 ounces lighter than the VIPER, and it's also a little bit shorter, which is interesting. Both of them are considered HD. The VIPER has what they call HD and XR coatings, and they up that terminology with the Razor by calling it HD Premium and XR Plus. Basically a bunch of mumbo jumbo to say that the Razor has more and better coatings to enable better shipping and handling of light coming through the objectives, basically. I wear glasses when I use these scopes, and I like to keep them on. So let me show you a little bit of how these work using glasses. So here I am looking at low mag through the VIPER. That's how far my eye is. And as I zoom in, that's how close my eye has to get a full image while on high power. And you can see that it's a little scrunchy, but I can still view the entire field with my glasses. And compare that to now with the Razor. There I am at low magnification, base mag, zoom in, and that's how much closer I have to get. Can't use my glasses there. Another spec that's useful if you like to look at insects with these scopes is that the Razor has a minimum focus distance of 11.5 feet, whereas the VIPER is 16 feet, so you could get closer to your house ants if you wanted. I use these scopes primarily for birding, so I tried out the VIPER HD 65mm in a store and was pretty impressed, at least with the low magnification, and decided I'd try it. So I got it, took it out in the field, and I was pretty disappointed when I got onto the higher magnifications that, you know, if I was looking at something beyond 100 yards or something, I really couldn't differentiate small details or colors very well. It was actually pretty difficult to even tell if I could get it into focus. So I got the Razor 65mm scope, and I tried that out, and it looked great. There still is some loss of resolution, obviously, and image quality at the higher magnifications, but the Razor at least still felt useful at those higher magnifications, where at the VIPER, I mean, sometimes in the field I'd just be like, I had to zoom out in order to see more clearly because the higher magnification just wasn't, it was actually making things worse. But the Razor actually still felt useful, even though obviously it has its limits. It's no Swaro vision. Now, having said that, both these scopes are actually quite comparable at their base magnification. So the VIPER HD is a 15 magnification, the Razor is 16, so hardly a difference. They're both very, very sharp at their low base magnifications. So if you don't need high magnifications and you only want 15, maybe 20, the VIPER is a pretty good scope. But for me, it does come down to optical quality. So I want to show you some images, and what I've done here is I've scoped a bunch of different near and far objects, including the moon, and I took pictures through the scope with my Moto X phone. I think the camera resolution is maybe 11 megabytes or megapixels or something like that. So it's a really poor way to compare quality, but it's the best I had, and I think I have at least some illustrations of some of the key differences in the scope. First image is one of some purple flowers with kind of a green reedy background. On the left is the VIPER, on the right is the Razor. And just taking an overall, step back glance, you can see the Razor does look a little bit sharper, and it's also a little bit more zoomed in. The Razor has just a slightly higher max magnification at 48, whereas the VIPER is 45. Focusing now on the VIPER though, take a look at the purple petals themselves. You can see on the top of the petals there's sort of this blue refractive discoloration. I didn't really notice that at first, but it was actually a common theme to the images as I went back and edited them and looked at them. Contrast that on the right to the flowers on the Razor's image, and there is a bit of brown, possibly reddish discoloration there, but not nearly as much, not nearly as disruptive as we'll continue to see throughout these images. In terms of focusing and sharpness, it's pretty difficult to compare because it kind of depended where the camera on the phone decided to focus. So there's areas on the left in the VIPER's image that actually look, more in focus, or maybe less motion blur than on the Razor image on the right. So that's kind of hard to compare. Looking at the background, sort of in the upper right area, you can see some discoloration at the edges of the reeds. On the right, in the same area on the right where with the Razor, you don't see nearly as much discoloration. So that's a pretty good image right there. The next one is some pine cones, and this is really zoomed in. On the left again is the VIPER, on the right is the Razor. And subjectively and maybe objectively, I think the pine cone on the right is slightly sharper than the one on the left. But again, it's really difficult to compare. And if you look at some of the pine needles, you can differentiate some of those better in the Razor image. But some of that might be due to motion artifact. If you look at some of the sky holes where you can see the sky behind, the edges of that, notice again the blue discoloration, a lot more prominent in the VIPER. Let's see, some moons. So again, in terms of sharpness and clarity, these appear to be fairly similar, but I think that was more due to where the camera focused on the image, because both of these could zoom in fairly well on the moon. But on the VIPER side, notice at the top there's a pretty prominent blue refractive edge, and then on the Razor, at least in that area, it's pretty clean, but you can even see in the Razor's image on the bottom right, there's a very thin cyan refraction, but not quite as prominent as the VIPER's. The next image is some flower baskets. This is not nearly as zoomed in, or actually as cropped. And again, this is one where it does look like it's sharper on the Razor side, but I think the phone focused a lot better on the leaves in the Razor image. Going back on the left though, if you look at the top of the image where there's some branches that are blurred out, again you can see that blue discoloration, and you don't see that in the Razor's image. And again, that was pretty consistent that I was seeing even in these poor, cell phone quality images. Although I will say the Moto X does take a pretty high resolution photo. I think it's something like 12 megabytes or something like that. Last one is the image of a robin. This was probably 70 feet away or thereabouts, and this image is cropped. All these images are cropped, but I used the very center as much as I could of the image field because that's where optics are going to be the clearest. So on the left, this was actually, I took a series of pictures, and this one was by far the best on the VIPER side. So it's actually a little bit misleading in how good it is. Notice at the top of the robin's head and in the eye, there's a little bit of image quality loss and a little bit of color distortion. And then on the underside of the branch, you can see that blue refractive line coming in again. Moving to the Razor side, I also took several images through the Razor, and pretty much all of them were this good, which, that says something about the scope as well. Returning back to the robin's head, there is a little bit of discoloration there, but it's still sharper and a little bit more true to reality. And then notice in the branch, not seeing any blue discoloration. There may be a little bit of brown refraction there, like I may have mentioned earlier, but it's definitely less significant, distorting to the overall image picture. And really, if you take a step back and you just kind of look at these from a little ways back, there's just overall the Razor is a clearer, more accurate image, which translates to a better experience out in the field, which is what I find. So to wrap all this up, the one that I'm going to end up keeping is the Razor scope. The one in this lineup that I wasn't able to test was the 80mm VIPER HD scope. I did try it out in the store, and at comparing base magnification, so the 65mm scope started at about 15, whereas the 80mm scopes, their base magnification is 20. So you're already starting out a little bit of a leg up, and even at that 20, the 80mm was very crisp, very clean, and very bright. So I didn't have it out in the field, so I can't compare, real world high magnification rates. Undoubtedly there is some loss of resolution when you go to the high mag, but if you're in the market for one of these and the VIPER HD 65 just isn't going to cut it, but you don't want to fork it over for the Razor, the VIPER 80mm is a pretty good contender. For me, I wanted the more premium optical coatings, and I was willing to have lower magnification and a little bit less light. So I'll be sticking with the Razor. Now I know it's not a Swirl Vision, and it's not even, there's a Razor 85mm, and that's supposed to be an amazing scope. But for the price, the Razor 65mm is a really good scope, so I'll be using it for a while, I think. So that's it for my review. Thanks for watching.